Hello, hello, beautiful soul. I am Dr. Andrea Pennington, founder of the Real Self-Love Movement. And I'm curious to know if you feel like you're living up to your potential. I know that's kind of a big question, but it's something that has impacted my life, asking this question over and over again to myself and to my clients. It first came to me when I heard Marianne Williamson. We were in Puerto Rico for an event, and I heard her say, if you feel like you are wasting your life's potential, you are. Like just that feeling of, I know I could be more or do more. Well, if you're not living up to your potential, I can tell you that most likely you're going to be leading a life of regret, because we are each on a journey toward living up to our greatest potential. You know, the psychologist Abraham Maslow back in the 50s described this hierarchy of needs. And he said that each of us has got this internal drive to meet our needs. First, it's the basic physiologic needs for food and water and then safety. And then we move up to these needs for feeling like we fit in and we belong. And then there's the need for love and esteem, feeling like we're worthy and we're capable and we're lovable. And then we get to the top, which is this need to self-actualize, to become that which you are most destined to become. He said that the writer must write, the painter must paint if they are to have peace in our lives. And the interesting thing about Abraham Maslow is that he said, beyond self-actualization, there's another drive. It's the drive for self-transcendence. That is, to go beyond the ego and the limited self and to actually use our self-actualization, using all of our powers and our talents and abilities in service to something greater, whether that's a community, a company, Mother Earth herself, or all of humanity. And so I'm bringing this up because what I recognized is that sometimes when we get frustrated, if we feel like we're not reaching higher, some people will find themselves going back down that hierarchical pyramid. Meaning, if we can't get to that sense of self-actualization, some people will just drop down to the next level and they'll look for the next relationship or the next achievement at work so that they can still feel like they're making some progress. But one of the things that has impressed me in my life is working with celebrities and superstars and seeing that even when they reach heights, they still go for more. And that's in you too. And so one of the things that really inspired me recently was spending time with my mother. Now, if you've seen any of my work online or read my books, I talk about my experience with my mom because she has shaped and molded me into the physician that I am today. And she unconditionally accepted me as a performing artist when my dad was a little less supportive of that side. But there's interesting notes about my mother's journey that in particular have to do with living up to potential. My mother was born in British Guyana, and she was the youngest of 5 children. And unfortunately, my mother lost her mom at the age of 11. So I never got to meet my maternal grandmother because she died of complications from type 2 diabetes. And my mother says that watching her mother die was the most painful experience of her life. And when my mom became a teenager, she told her brothers, who were sort of managing the whole estate, she told them that she wanted to go to London to become a nurse. And they threw a fit. They said, absolutely not. You would have to see people naked. You know, a nurse would see people without their clothes. But because my mother suffered in watching her own mom die from diabetes, she really wanted to become a healer. And even though it was uncommon for women, especially women in British Guyana, to go off and go to England and become a nurse, she did it. She defied the odds. And when she got to nursing school and found out that not only is type 2 diabetes a manageable condition, it's actually preventable. And she was devastated to find out that her mother probably could have lived longer if she had the right care. And that set my mom on a path to, her own heroic journey of living this crusade. She said she would never let another person die of a preventable disease if she could help it. Now that's pretty epic. But my mother has actually lived that crusade all the way up into her 70s, which was about the time that she started slowing down. Now, my mother ended up moving to the United States and started working in a hospital in California. And she was appalled at the way that these doctors would speak down to the nursing staff. She was like, at least the people in Great Britain didn't, speak down to us. And she determined that she was going to go to medical school. Now, I should tell you, by the time she went to med school, she was 38. She had 3 kids. I was the youngest of the bunch. And she put herself into medical school. And this was a brown-skinned immigrant with a funny accent, in the 70s, where it was a very white male-dominated profession in the United States. But she was feisty, my mother, and she did it. And one of the things that came up in the last few years is Alzheimer's. Now, many of the other people in her family, her siblings, also developed Alzheimer's. Some of the family got it as early as their 40s. But my mother didn't. She lived an incredibly healthy life, no diabetes, no Alzheimer's, until her late 70s. We started noticing memory decline and things like that. But she kept those diseases at bay. And I think it's part of it has been her determination to live this healthy life and to live life on her own terms, not settling for what the status quo said or what other people said. She was fierce and feisty. Well, I was visiting her in the US after I'd already moved to France and after I had given my first TED Talk. Now, my first TED Talk was about becoming who you really are. And for me, it was a very vulnerable share. It was the first time that I admitted publicly that I had dealt with depression and anxiety. It was the first time that I told people that despite having this big media career and everything that looked successful, that I was actually suffering and feeling miserable inside because I wasn't living my truth. I wasn't doing all of the spiritual stuff and the performing arts that I love. And I visited my mom and I pulled out my laptop and I showed her the TED Talk. And this was at a time when her memory was still there. She had like 30 minutes of good memory time where she could focus. And she watched my TED Talk and she kept nodding and talking back as if it was happening live. And at the end of this TED Talk, she turned to me and she said, "I can tell you're doing your master's work. Keep it up." Because in my mom's vocabulary, she believes that living your destiny is doing the master's work. And she said, "You know what? I have lived such a full life. I've dated who I wanted to date. I've done what I wanted to do. I've lived in multiple different countries. And now, if I were to meet my maker, I believe he would say, 'Job well done.'" And it just struck me that here this woman who had lived such a fierce life could actually say that if she were to die right then, she would be dying with no regrets. She will have lived the life that she wanted, defying the odds, doing things that women of color never would have dreamt of doing, especially if her family could have controlled it. And then she said to me, "I wish you were here more often with my granddaughter, but I know that you're doing the master's work. And so keep going." And I just remember feeling so grateful and so humbled that making that transition that I made from being this doc in the box with my TV career and my medical career and shifting to being an entrepreneur and a spiritual teacher living in the south of France, that my mom was able to say she got it and she supported me. That was huge. And so this idea about living up to your potential, like really finding out what you're here to do in this life, bringing up your strengths and your talents and putting them into service, sometimes in a way that doesn't meet anybody else's recommendation or their standard. Like the kind of life I'm living now, there is no career guide for what I do, but it's brought to me the greatest fulfillment, to myself, to my young daughter, and to now these global luminaries that I get to work with from around the world, doing books and documentary films and retreats. And so I'm just inviting you to look at your life as a heroic journey. And you're here, and of course you're going to get tested in life. You know, life is a teacher. Sure, you're going to get tested. But you have the power to live with such resilience. You have the ability to tune into your potential and really turn your life into an epic, heroic life story. And so I invite you to tune in and ask yourself, am I really living up to my potential? Could I be doing more? Could I potentially be the hero of my own life story? And then tune into this masterclass. I'd love to be your guide and your mentor to really stepping it up in your life as the hero of your own epic life story. See you there.